All right, good morning to you. It's Daybreak at I-Fiber One News Radio, 741. At I-Fiber One, I've got Mason County Sheriff Casey Salisbury in studio with me this morning. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
It is foggy out there.
Yes, it is.
Looks like we are seeing the definite change in the weather as Wednesday looks to be 3 inches of rain just on Wednesday. And as the temperatures move into the fall, we still see people going out, not only recreating and hiking in the mountains and things like that, but people are also out, I'd imagine by about now, starting looking around for mushrooms and just people getting out in the forests. Yes. And we will undoubtedly, as we do year over year, have already started reporting on it, but people go missing in the forests, and it's an often and somewhat easily avoidable thing.
Yes. I think one of the first things is letting people know at least where you're going to be, where you're going to start out at, so they have a starting point and where you're going to go. That's extremely helpful. Mm-hmm. The other one's being prepared for the weather. When you go up just a little bit in elevation, those temperatures start to come down, and we spend hundreds and hundreds of hours a year searching for people that go up into the high country. And interestingly enough, sometimes too, especially if people aren't used to the forested areas like we have around here, people can get not too far off of a trail or road and really not be all that far from going the right direction and being right back on that trail or road. And they can't see it, so they go the wrong way. They don't have generally a very good idea of where they're going. But most of the time, it's people letting other people know where they're at and where they're going, what their route is, and then having the right equipment and training to do that kind of activity. Another one that I always thought would be not a bad idea that people are going way up in the high country is to have those beacons that you can you can track them with, mm-hmm. so that if they get lost, they can turn that thing on and you can zero in on them. But when you get in the Olympic National Park up there, flying over it's what really I think would be the best thing for people to do. When you fly over the Olympic National Park in the Olympic Mountains, there is not just one mountain that goes up. There's multiple peaks and valleys in there, and you get down in one of those valleys and come back up, and you can get really disoriented as to where they're at. So they have the right compassing and the right kind of things for that environment really help.
We often are celebrating and excited the fact that we used to have a million devices in our pockets. We used to have a cassette player to listen to music and a phone to talk to people on that. And if you needed maps, you carry a map with you. Now, for the most part, everything comes on your phone, included with that GPS and compasses. But if there's no service, if there's no signal, right, the likelihood of you being able to use this as much more than a brick is maybe limited. So in these cases, better to have a old style compass, a map that is waterproof, that you actually know how to read, one of these GPS beacons that work regardless of cell phone towers perhaps, or based on satellite technology.
Yeah, and as you know, for us, I mean, our search and rescue teams, for the most part, other than our coordinators, they're volunteers. Mm-hmm. So when we get Olympic Mountain Rescue and the other volunteer searchers to go up and do those kind of things, it's a lot of hours. The other thing that really helps, too, is every once in a while, we get somebody that goes into an area, they come out of the area, a family member calls and says they're lost, and we send people into an area, and they've already left. Mm. They don't call back to say we're out of the area, and, mm-hmm. and there's a delay in time. So especially like you said, this time of year, it's getting colder, the dampness up there, and then it gets cold quickly.
It is another conversation that we've been having. Foggy this morning, and people come whipping around corners and driving at higher speeds than normal, and it's foggy, so please be careful for that. But you guys looked into some of these numbers on speeding in the North Shore, kind of where we were talking about the other week.
Yeah, it's always interesting to us. Remember, the speed watch machine does not tell you what kind of car it is or your license plates. That's what people always try to want us to give them that information. It doesn't do that. It just tells the number of cars that pass through an area, the time of day, the speed of the vehicle, and it takes that data and it'll tell you how many vehicles pass through an area, what the peak hours were. It's kind of interesting to me on the one on the North Shore, because oftentimes people are really upset about speeding vehicles. There might be one or two, and we hear it's just constant. And we'll run the speed watch database deal out there, and what we found out, and we talked last week about early morning hours, what I thought was rather interesting on this one, the peak amount of vehicle speeding was between 11 a.m. and 2. Not the AM PM hours of coming in.
I mean, that's
back
what
and
you
forth.
traditionally think. People running in and out on their way to work or running home is when the speeds
those
go up.
areas weren't too bad, and the average speed up there on this one, the average speed was 36.8 miles per hour. That's not too bad.
On a 35, right?
In a 35 area.
Okay.
That's really not too bad comparatively. We did the same thing out on the South Shore a year or so ago, and DOT came in and measured that. And both those particular areas on the North and the South Shore or along the canal, I think part of it is there's homes are right next to the roadway. I mean, literally, you pull off the road and you're right into somebody's house or their driveway.
Uh-huh.
When you're standing on the edge of the road watching cars go by as opposed to being in the car is very, very different. When we go out and stand there on a traffic stop and you're watching cars come at you and you're 55, 60 or whatever the speeds are, they're really coming at you. They're a lot quicker when you're standing still than when you're moving with traffic. It doesn't seem quite as bad.
Sure.
And so sometimes people's predictions on people on speeding vehicles is not super accurate. Interesting on that one was the amount of traffic flow that we saw up there. It was 30, I don't have the data with me right now, but it was somewhere around there, 3,400 cars passed through there back and forth in that area in a matter of like 6 days.
Wow.
It's a high volume of vehicle on a very narrow road.
Mm-hmm.
But actual speeds weren't as bad as what was anticipated. And those peak hours are what was kind of interesting. It tells me that those hours, 11 to 2, who's home from 11 to 2?
Yeah, folks.
Peak hours of during today.
Retired folks, perhaps, or just folks
People that live in the area.
who live there,
going
yeah.
in and out of the area. So
feel like they know the roads well enough.
yes, and the other thing is to bear in mind, I mean, these numbers are there, but the other thing that's kind of interesting that has a big piece on that lower speed is usually when people first go through there and they see the speed sign, then they start slowing down. So the next few days they hold it down because they know it's there.
Yeah.
So there's another reason it stays low with the speed watch sign, but it does show volume and peak hours of the day for traffic and moving back and forth. But it does help to get people slowed down in those areas. We've got 2 more of them set out right now in different areas measuring those speeds. But please, in the morning, it's also darker out. And again, my concern is when we have young people standing on the edge of the road waiting for a bus.
Yeah.
It doesn't take much but a step to be in a lane or out of a lane.
When was this? Saturday, I was went up to the zoo for an event with my wife, and Mom was there as well, and we were driving up I-5 and we saw a car that was swerving, kind of really going over. They were in the fast lane, kind of really going over the lines, and it was scary to drive behind them, and so we wanted to get around as quickly as possible. My mom, who was in the back seat, ended up calling 911 and giving the license plate on this, saying we are at exit whatever, and this car is swerving. We looked in the window, it looked like the lady was about ready to fall asleep. So if you call, there's something happens, right? They said, well, we've been getting some calls about perhaps a car like this, and we're going to dispatch somebody to see if we can catch up with them. But how does that process work?
Well, when you call a dispatch center, wherever you're at, and you dial 911, it's going to ring into the local dispatch center. So you're depending on what area you were in. If you're on I-5 and you're in the Olympia area, it's going to ring into the dispatch center out of Olympia area. And as soon as that call comes in, those dispatchers will notify whatever area you're in. They'll notify the county or the state units or the city units, wherever you're at, and they'll do a broadcast on that vehicle. And the police cars, including the state troopers and stuff, we're all over the place.
Sure.
We're moving all over that place. And if you're in the area, you can get to that area, and people will start moving to that area. Sometimes you're right there. Sometimes you're not. It's a distance out. If state doesn't have somebody available, they'll say, please advise county. Or if it's at the south end of the county and you're heading out highway out towards the Squaxin Island, we'll ask the tribal units to jump on and check for us.
Okay.
Whoever's the closest. It's still amazing to me. I went to Seattle a while back to work with the Seattle Police Department on a project, an evening project up there. I was just absolutely amazed going into Seattle in the evening going in, because the traffic's not as high volume going in as it is coming out in these hours. At the amount of things, I don't like to drive up there anyway, because just traffic everywhere. The amount of people that are driving, I'm driving along and I look over and there's a guy with his laptop computer sitting on the dash of his car, and he's messing with his laptop. And I thought, how amazing this is to me, with traffic slowing down and speeding up. And the interesting was to me is I was thinking about this guy, and I look over and there's a guy getting kind of close to me. I look over and I thought he looked kind of odd driving along. I mean, not the individual himself, but I thought it just looked kind of odd. I couldn't figure out what was going on. This guy was driving down the highway with no windshield in his car.
What?
It was driving
Oh
down.
my
You could
gosh.
see that's what it was. You know, you could see
The
the
wind
wind blowing.
was in his face.
I don't know how it was surviving. I'm thinking, gosh, it's tough up there in King County.
Yeah.
But you know, all those things that
Wow.
are going on in the vehicles that you see. I've made numerous stops as well as other law enforcement. You think initially you can almost, after you do it for a while, you can tell it's not DUI, but you'll go to make a stop on a vehicle that's bumping all over the place, and people are doing their hair, they're putting on their makeup, they're doing all these other things, they're fussing with their child in the back seat that's in a car seat, and the car's going all over the road, and you can tell the driving patterns look very different. But it's just, there's so many distracted issues, and that's why there's been such a push to put down cell phones and not do those kind of things.
Wow, very nice. Mason County Sheriff Casey Salisbury. We'll keep checking back in with you as we move forward through the rest of the year. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.